ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जायमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवती नैष्टिकी। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामीनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna, reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 6, Creation of the Universal Form. Currently, we are in the final section of this chapter, texts 34 to 40, where the theme is highest perfection can be attained simply by hearing Lord's activities and the glories. So, Maitreya Muni is now describing a very beautiful verse, text 36. We'll recite this verse. Very, very famous verse of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Tathapi kirtayamanga
तथापि कीर्तयामङ्ग्य
yathamati yathashrutam
यथामति यथा श्रुतम्
kirtim hare swam satkartum
कीर्तिं हरे स्वां सत्कर्तुम्
giram anyabhita asatim.
गिरम् अन्याभिधासतिम्.
Translation.
In spite of my inability, whatever I have been able to hear from the spiritual master and whatever I could assimilate, I am now describing in glorification of the Lord by pure speech. For otherwise, my power of speaking would remain unchaste. Purport. The purification of the conditioned soul necessitates purification of its consciousness. By the presence of consciousness, the presence of the transcendental soul is verified. And as soon as consciousness leaves the material body is not active. Consciousness is perceived, therefore, by activities. The theory put forward by empiric philosophers that consciousness can remain in an inactive state is the proof of their poor fund of knowledge. One should not become unchaste by stopping the activities of pure consciousness. If the activities of pure consciousness are stopped, certainly the conscious living force will be otherwise engaged, because unless engaged, the consciousness has no standing. Consciousness cannot be silent even for a moment. When the body does not act, the consciousness acts in the form of dreams. Unconsciousness is artificial. By induced extraneous help, it remains for a limited period, but when the intoxication of the drug is finished, or when one is awake, the consciousness again acts earnestly. Maitreya's statement is that in order to avoid unchaste conscious activities, he was trying to describe the unlimited glories of the Lord, although he did not have the ability to describe them perfectly. This glorification of the Lord is not a product of research, but the result of hearing submissively from the authority of the spiritual master. It is also not possible to repeat all that one has heard from his spiritual master, but one can narrate as far as possible by one's honest endeavor. It does not matter whether the Lord's glories are fully explained or not. One must attempt to engage one's bodily, mental, and verbal activities in the transcendental glorification of the Lord. Otherwise, such activities will remain unchaste and impure. The existence of the conditioned soul can be purified only by the method of engaging mind and speech in the service of the Lord. The Tridandi sannyasi of the Vaishnava school accepts three rods representing the vow to engage in the service of the Lord with the body, mind, and speech, whereas the Ekadandi sannyasi takes the vow to become one with the Supreme. Since the Lord is the Absolute, there is no distinction between him and his glories. The glories of the Lord, as chanted by the Vaishnava sannyasi, are as substantial as the Lord himself, and thus, while glorifying the Lord, the devotees become one with him in transcendental interest, although he remains eternally a transcendental servitor. This simultaneously one and different position of the devotee makes him eternally purified, and thus his life becomes a complete success. Hare Krishna.
So very beautiful verse by Maitreya Muni. He's saying, my dear Vidura, tathapi kirtanam anga. Anga is Vidura. So we have seen, different names. Kshatta, Anga. Next we will say, my dear son, oh Vatsa. And that's a age difference also between Muni, Maitreya and Vidura as well. So he says, tathapi kirtamayam anga, yathamati yathashritam. In spite of my inability, whatever I have been able to hear from my spiritual master, and not that whatever we have heard, everything we will be able to repeat, yathamati yathashritam, kirtim harem swasat kartum. Glorification of the pure Lord, I am engaged. Otherwise, my tongue, my power of speech will become unchaste, asati. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that purification of the conditioned soul necessitates purification of his consciousness. So the soul means consciousness, and consciousness means activity, and activity means engagement. That means the soul means engagement. So Srila Prabhupada says the consciousness is perceived by practical activity. And in fact, one is so always active. Bhagavad Gita said, Nahi kaschit kshanamapi jatu tishtanti akarmakrit. One will be always engaged. Prabhupada says here, even when one is sleeping, the consciousness will be active and will be chasing so many different things in the form of a dream. So it is only the body is tired and body is sleeping, consciousness is always active, even in the conditioned state. What to speak of the consciousness when the consciousness is in the purified state? So Maitreya Muni here says, to avoid the unchaste conscious activities, he is trying to describe the unlimited glories of the Lord. And this glorification of the Lord should come in parampara. It is not the subject matter of research. One will hear from one spiritual master, and whatever one will hear, not everything one will be able to assimilate. But whatever one assimilates, one should, go ahead and describe whatever one is able to do. So Prabhupada says, actually it is not possible to describe glories of the Lord. Even we know that Lord Ananta is describing with his Ananta personality, Ananta mouths, the glories of the Lord, but he is completely unfinished. The glories of the Lord are unlimited. But still, a devotee, yathamati yathashritam, will always attempt to describe the glories of the Lord so that his power of speech remains chaste by describing the glory. So word here used is sati and asati. So sati means very chaste personality. And the tongue, which is not describing the glories of the Lord, there is a chance of it becoming asati or unchaste. And this is the goal, Prabhupada says, of a Tridandi sannyas. Tridandi sannyasis, they are the Vaishnava sannyasis who take the three danda in their hands, three rods, representing body, mind, and speech in complete service of the Supreme Lord. Whereas the Mayavadi sannyasis, they carry only ekadanda, thinking that Aham Brahman, I have only become the Lord. So Prabhupada says, although Mayavadi think that they have become Lord by carrying one danda, but they are actually the devotees of the Lord in interest, become one with the Lord while carrying Tridanda. Because the Lord and activities of the Lord, they are non-different. While glorifying the Lord, devotee becomes one with the Lord in transcendental interest, while retains his original position as the servitor of the Lord. And this is the simultaneous achintya bheda bheda tattva for a devotee. Although he's carrying tridanda, he's still ekadanda because he's one in interest with the Lord, one with the Lord because Lord and Lord glories are non-different, and he's always engaged in glorifying the Lord, and while simultaneously engaging body, mind, and speech, and thus his life becomes completely successful. Next verse, text 37. This is also a very beautiful verse. We'll recite this. एकान्तलाभं वचसोऽनुपुंसाम्
एकान्तलाभं वचसोऽनुपुंसाम्
सुश्लोकमौलेर्गुणवादमाहुः श्रुतेश्च विद्वद्भिरुपाकृतायाम् तथा सुधायाम् उपसंप्रयोगम्
The highest perfectional gain of humanity is to engage in discussion of the activities and glories of the pious actor. Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing by the greatly learned sages that the actual purpose of the ear is served just by being near them. Purport: the impersonalists are very much afraid of hearing the activities of the Lord because they think that the happiness derived from the transcendental situation of Brahman is the ultimate goal of life. They think that everyone's activity, even that of the personality of Godhead, is mundane. But the idea of happiness indicated in this verse is different because it relates to the activities of the Supreme Personality, who has transcendental qualities. The word gunavadam is significant because the qualities of the Lord and his activities and pastime are the subject matter for the discussion of devotees. A rishi like Maitreya is certainly not interested in discussing anything pertaining to mundane qualities. Yet, he says that the highest perfectional stage of transcendental realization is to discuss the Lord's activities. Srila Jiva Goswami therefore concludes that topics regarding transcendental activities of the Lord are far beyond the transcendental realization of Kaivalya happiness. These transcendental activities of the Lord are so arranged in writing by the great sages that simply by hearing of those narrations, one becomes perfectly self-realized. And the proper use of the ear and the tongue is also achieved. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is one of such great literature, and the highest perfectional stage of life is attained simply by hearing and reciting its contents.
Further, Maitreya Muni says, Ekanta labham vachasonupumsam. Look at the translation. Ekanta labham means there is no comparison to the labha, the gain one will have. The highest perfectional gain of humanity, Ekanta labham, is attained by engaging in the activities and the glories of Sushloka Mauler, the pious actor. And these topics are so badly arranged that the actual purpose of the ear is served simply by sitting near those who are describing these topics. Upasamprayo. Life is so boring, just constantly thinking aham brahmasmi, aham brahmasmi, aham brahmasmi. Klesho adhikatarastesham. And mind attached to avyakta asakta chetasam. Kadi dukkham. And when you narrate the glories of the Supreme Lord, these people will simply run away. Why? Because they think activity means binding. Because all my activities are binding. Therefore, Lord's activity also must be binding. Because they think the Supreme Lord to be ordinary person, therefore they think the activities of the Lord are also ordinary, and thus try to avoid these activities. But actually, the Lord's activities are Sushloka Mauler. Sushloka Mauler means these are activities of the highest pious actor who are worth always discussing. Prabhupada says here the word Gunavadam means the qualities of the Lord, his activities, are the special subject matter for the discussions of the devotees. So devotees will be engaged in discussing activities of the Lord. And here we see the discussion between two great personalities, Ṛṣi Maitreya, very, very powerful, accomplished saint, and Vidura, who is a retired politician after a lifetime of phenomenal politics of Mahabharata. They are not sitting and going to discuss something mundane matter, some mundane qualities. They are sitting and discussing the transcendental activities of the Supreme Lord. And this is confirmed by Jiva Goswami. So now see the authority of Srila Jiva Goswami. To prove concluding remarks, they will come by Srila Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And at certain points, Prabhupada says both Vishwanath Chakravarti and Jiva Goswami, though that means that is the final, the topmost authority when both of them are concluding something. So Jiva Goswami concludes that the activities of the Lord, they are far beyond Kaivalya happiness. In fact, that verse, Kaivalyam Narakayate, Tridashapur Akasha Pushpayate, that the happiness of merging in Brahman, it looks like a naraka for a devotee because he is deriving such happiness in direct engagement with, in the service of the Supreme Lord. And now the activities are so wonderful and they are so wonderfully arranged by the great saints. So there is Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Ramayana, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita. So the not only activities are purifying and wonderful activities by the Supreme Lord, so Shloka Mauler, the best of the actor, these activities are also so wonderfully arranged. And thus, engaging in hearing those activities is the proper use of one's ear and tongue. And Srila Prabhupada says here, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is one such literature. And the highest perfectional stage in life is attained simply by hearing and reciting the content of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Upasamprayogam, simply sitting next to those who are reciting Bhagavatam, one can attain great benefit. So Upanishad also means that sitting next, Upavasa, right? So Upasamprayogam. Text 38. Atmano vasito vatsa mahima kavinadina samvatsara sahasrante dhiya yoga vipakkaya. Translation.
O my son, the original poet Brahma, after mature meditation for 1000 celestial years, could know only that the glories of the Supreme Soul are inconceivable. Purport. There are some froggish philosophers who want to know the Supreme Soul by means of philosophy and mental speculation. And when the devotees, who are to some extent in knowledge of the Supreme Lord, admit that the glories of the Lord are inestimable or inconceivable, the froggish philosophers adversely criticize them. These philosophers, like the frog in the whale, who tried to estimate the measurement of the Pacific Ocean, like to take the trouble over fruitless mental speculation instead of taking instructions from the devotees like the original poet, namely Brahma. Lord Brahma underwent a severe type of meditation for 1000 celestial years. Yet he said that the glories of the Lord are inconceivable. Therefore, what can the froggish philosophers hope to gain from their mental speculations? It is said in the Brahma Samhita that the mental speculator may fly through the sky of speculation with the velocity of the mind or the wind for thousands of millions of years, and still he will find it inconceivable. The devotees, however, do not waste time in such vain searching after knowledge of the Supreme, but they submissively hear the glories of the Lord from bona fide devotees. Thus, they transcendently enjoy the process of hearing and chanting. The Lord approves the devotional activities of the devotees or Mahatmas, as he says, Mahatmanastu mampartha daivim prakritim ashrita bhajanti ananya manaso gyatva bhutadim avyayam सततं कीर्तयन्तो मां यतत यथान्तश्च दृढव्रता नमस्यान्तस्य मां भक्त्या नित्ययुक्त उपासते. Bhagavad Gita 9.13 to 14. The pure devotees of the Lord take shelter of the Para Prakriti, the internal potency of the Lord, called Lakshmi Devi, Sita Devi, Śrīmati Radharani, or Śrīmati Rukmini Devi, and thus they become actual Mahatmas or great souls. Mahatmas are not fond of indulging in mental speculations, but they actually take to the devotional service of the Lord without the slightest deviation. Devotional service is manifested by the primary process of hearing and chanting about the activities of the Lord. This transcendental method, practiced by the Mahatmas, gives them sufficient knowledge of the Lord, because if the Lord can at all be known, to some extent it is only through the means of devotional service and not other way. One may go on speculating and waste a valuable time of his human life, but that will not help anyone to enter into the precincts of the Lord. The Mahatmas, however, are not concerned with knowing the Lord by mental speculation, because they enjoy hearing about the glorious activities in his transcendental dealings with his devotees or with the demons. The devotees take pleasure in both and are happy in this life and the life after.
Further, Maitreya says, Atmano vasito vatsaha, O my son Vidura, Mahima Kavi Adinah. The original poet Brahma, after Samvatsara Sahasrante, after 1000 celestial years of meditation, his Dhiya, Yoga Vipakkaya, his Dhiya, intelligence, is completely matured in meditation. He glorified the Supreme Lord by the apt poetry, and which is so beautifully arranged, and that is specifically here Maitreya Muni is referring to Brahma Samhita. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that the froggish philosophers, by the means of philosophy and mental speculation, can never know the Supreme Lord. Why the frog is coming? Because very soon we are going to enter the 5th canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, where there is going to be the description of the universe. And the description of the universe of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam may be bewildering to the conditioned mind of a living entity who will try to understand the universe by his own Dhiya. Okay. And that's why this example of frog in the well and the Pacific Ocean, Srila Prabhupada quotes again and again. Glories of the Lord are inestimable or inconceivable. And just like the froggish philosopher can never understand the expanse of the Pacific Ocean, similarly, somebody who is engaged in mental speculation will never understand the glories of the Supreme Lord. Lord Brahma, who is Adi Kavi, after 1000 years of great tapasya, he could understand some glories of the Lord. And there, Prabhupada quotes Brahma Samhita, that this is only possible by understanding from devotee of the Lord. Otherwise, one may go on mental speculating for many, many long years. Panthastu koti shata vatsara sampragamyo vayor athapi manaso munipungavana. One may speculate by the speed of the mind or speed of the wind. One may start speculation with the speed of mind. And when the mind is tired, he may come down to the speed of the wind and go like this for koti shata vatsara, millions of years, but still he will be hardly able to reach the inconceivable glories of the Lord. Realizing this, devotees do not waste their time in the vain searching, and they are engaged in submissively hearing the glories of the Supreme Lord from bona fide devotees. And this method of hearing and chanting is approved by the Supreme Lord in Bhagavad Gita. Mahatmanastu mam partha daivim prakritim ashritah bhajanti ananya manaso jnatva bhutadim avyayam. That the Mahatmas, they take shelter of the Daivi Prakriti. Prabhupada writes here, Lakshmi Devi, Sita Devi, Śrīmati Radharani, Śrīmati Rukmini Devi. This is the Daivi Prakriti. And thus they become Mahatma, the great soul. And they are not interested in some mental speculation, but what they will do? Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantascha dridavratah namasyantascha mam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate. With great determination, they will be always engaged in the primary process of hearing and chanting. And then, Prabhupada writes here, if the Lord at all can be known, he can be known only to devotees, only by devotional service. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi tatvatah. So these are the Mahatmas who are concerned, who are absolutely not concerned about the mental speculation, but they take great pleasure in hearing and chanting about the Supreme Lord, and thus remain happy, Prabhupada writes, both in this life by performing the happy process of devotional service, chanting, dancing, feasting, and the life after, which is, they are always engaged in the devotional activities in the realm of Vaikuntha or Golok Vrindavan. Text 39. Ato bhagavato maya mayinamapi mohini yat swayam chatmavartatma naveda kim utapare. Translation.
The wonderful potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is bewildering even to the jugglers. That potential power is unknown even to the self-sufficient Lord, so it is certainly unknown to others. Purport: the froggish philosophers and mundane wranglers in science and mathematical calculation may not believe in the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but they are sometimes puzzled by the wonderful jugglery of man and nature. Such jugglers and magicians of the mundane world are actually puzzled by the jugglery of the Lord in his transcendental activities. But they try to adjust their bewilderment by saying that it is all mythology. There is, however, nothing impossible or mythological in the Supreme Omnipotent Person. The most wonderful puzzle for the mundane wranglers is that while they remain calculating the length and breadth of the unlimited potency of the Supreme Person, his faithful devotees are set free from the bondage of material engagement simply by appreciating the wonderful jugglery of the Supreme in the practical field. The devotees of the Lord see the wonderful dexterity in everything with which they come in contact in all circumstances of eating, sleeping, working, etc. A small banyan fruit contains thousands of small seeds, and each seed holds the potency of another tree, which again holds the potency of many millions of such fruits as causes and effects. So the trees and seeds engage the devotees in meditation about the activities of the Lord, while the mundane wranglers waste time in dry speculation and mental concoction, which are fruitless in both his life and the next. In spite of their pride in speculation, they can never appreciate the simple potential activities of the banyan tree. Such speculators are poor souls destined to remain in matter perpetually.
Ato bhagavato maya. The wonderful potency of the Supreme is bewildering. Mayinam api mohini is bewildering even to the jugglers. Yet, this is like muhyanti yat surayah. Yat swayam chatma vartatma na veda kiputapare. The potential power is unknown even to the self-sufficient Lord, what to speak of the others. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that the froggish philosophers and the mundane wranglers, they may not believe in the inconceivable potency of the Lord. Siddhanta Saraswati, he says, unless you believe in the inconceivable potency of the Lord, there is a chance that you will always become atheist. Right? So he says two very powerful statements. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, unless one is engaged in the deity worship, that religion will slowly glide down to atheism. And that's why we will see that the Abrahamic religions, because there is no concept of deity worship, there is a very easy glide down to either materialism, excessive materialism, or atheism. And Siddhanta Saraswati says, unless one understands and appreciates the inconceivable potency of the Lord, one will eventually become atheist, non-believer. So the Lord is wonderful. He has the Achintya Shakti. And this Achintya Shakti, when comes into play, Prabhupada writes here, by this jugglery, the greatest of the scientists are puzzled. Like recently, I was reading one statement by a very great mathematician. He said, the universe is the best mathematical piece. The highest mathematician is the Lord. And he's saying that simply the display of the universe is the highest form of mathematics. So, right. So this is the actual position of the Supreme Lord. But however, if somebody does not take shelter of the Supreme Lord, he will simply waste his life calculating the length and the breadth of the Supreme Lord, while the faithful devotees of the Lord will wonderfully enjoy the activities of the Lord, honor prasad of the Lord, and go back home, back to Godhead to meet the Lord personally. Right. There is another very famous biologist who received the Nobel Prize. He said that I started my journey in search of life, and in the old age, he writes very beautiful passage. He says that in the old age, I do not know from where the life slipped from my hands, and I was just remained with some molecules and some amino acids. So he said that my original thirst was to find out what is the origin of life, and I was trying to find out the origin of life, but in the lifetime of my research, life slipped from my hands, and I just left out with some amino acids and some some matter which is no life. So a devotee of the Lord will take shelter of the Lord and appreciate wonderful activities of the Lord. Which activities? Prabhupada gives example, just like very simple thing. One will see the banyan tree, and one will see such a huge expansive banyan tree, and there are thousands of, is coming from a small seed giving rise to a huge banyan tree, and this banyan tree again has thousands of seeds, fruits, and each fruit will have thousands of seeds.
You are not audible.
The Mundane Wrangler will waste time with dry speculation and mental concoction, which is fruitless both in this life and in the next. While the devotee of the Lord will simply absorb himself in the potential wonderful activities and live perpetually happy in this life and in the next. So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Yesterday, Harshad Prabhu shared very beautiful list of names of Vidura in the 3rd and 4th canto. So I will share that in our group. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Prabhuji. Hare
Prabhupada.
Krishna.
Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Pranam, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Can you add me in that group where you will be sharing this? Because I don't think I am part of that group, Prabhuji.
Yes, Mataji. We'll just share
What
the
should I?
link tomorrow. A
Okay,
simple
Prabhuji.
group it is, WhatsApp, a sport WhatsApp group.
Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Because some of the things you are sharing there, so I am not able to access. Thank you.
Yes. Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Prabhuji, thank you so much. Hare Krishna.